And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have Chris, who is the Managing Director of Security Juniper Networks. Chris is also responsible for the security business unit's go-to-market efforts and sales achievement. And today he'll be telling us a little bit more about smiling as you've been profited and how intrusion deception is drinking hacker profits. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together to welcome Chris Stoddard.
Good, okay. Move ahead. So while that's getting set up, let me thank Wilson and the WestCon team. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, good. I think it's on. And all of you, frankly, for taking time out of your day to visit with us. It's good to be here in Singapore. I'm visiting from Philadelphia, where I run the business out of the United States. And what I thought we'd do today with this presentation is get a little bit deeper into the economics of our security story. There's a lot of people in our company and others that can talk about speeds and feeds and a lot of the technology elements, but what we want to talk about today a little bit is, in fact, the impact of security on your business from a business perspective. So let's get into it. I'm going to drip through this real quick. We all use this slide. Greg talked about it. Again, 3 pillars in our business. There's a lot of people that say, well, Juniper is just a routing and switching company. Not the case. We're in 3 distinct businesses. Security is one of them, as Greg mentioned. It's a $1 billion business, roughly for us, and takes up a good share of our R&D, and also is a place where, as Greg just mentioned, we're investing heavily in acquisitions and new investment and new investments in technology to drive an innovation agenda, which I suspect perhaps is new news to you from Juniper. For a long time, we were associated simply with NetScreen and some of the other firewall technologies. But today, we're actually moving into, as Greg mentioned, distributed denial of service attacks, which is a big deal for the financial service industry and others. We're moving into the web application security, so we're going up stack, not just traditional layer 2 and layer 3, and Greg talked a little bit about that, and I'm going to get into more of that here. And of course, we had just announced the threat database, which we'll talk about, so a cloud offering. Show of hands, who had seen any of those new innovations from Juniper? You're not going to offend me if many of you hadn't. Well, that's because it's a new story from us, and it was launched at RSA 2013 earlier this year in San Francisco. And I'm going to put a plug in for our presence at RSA Singapore here in 2 weeks. If you're going, I highly encourage you to stop by our booth. Our Senior Vice President and General Manager for the business unit is flying in for that, as is our VP of Marketing and others. So we're going to put a big push at RSA 2013 here in Singapore. We're a platinum sponsor, so big booth, big stories, big demos. But again, it's going to be perpetuating stories and things out of us that you probably haven't seen in the past and that we're excited to tell you about. So if you think about our product set all up, we're actually focused on 3 distinct areas that we think you as customers, people running IT shops in businesses should care about or do care about. One is connectivity and the push towards BYOD, which Simon will talk about here in a little bit. The other is platforms and just protecting the infrastructure. That's a pretty basic one. And then the third is applications, which we'll talk about more today. And the reason we think applications is so interesting is that we've recently, and Greg talked a little bit about that, I'm going to get a little bit deeper. We co-funded a survey with the Ponemon Institute out of the United States. Actually, it's a global survey, but and roughly 400 customers here in APAC participated. And we asked them what their priorities were. Now, there's a lot of buzz about next-gen firewalling in the marketplace. And Palo Alto has done a fantastic job spinning up a marketing campaign to convince you that application visibility and control is the end-all be-all. But as Greg said, for me, it's not really even a security function. It's visibility and control. And so we say that's interesting, and it solves this notion of an inside-out problem. So users inside your business going to places on the internet and potentially getting into bad areas that expose malware to the user and then thus to your business. But the reality is that we think users are pretty smart. We think people inside your companies generally understand where not to go in the industry, and you've been deploying protectionary mechanisms for years to stop them. And and so we instituted a study and we said, so what is keeping you up? Is this application visibility control, this whole next-gen firewall thing, which is usually associated with the enterprise edge or a campus and branch environment, is that what's keeping you up at night? And they said, well, not really. What we're more interested in is the web traffic. And the web traffic drives and is exposing access to data centers where the data that is driving the web traffic lives. And they said, that's the more interesting concern for me. So we said, well, we're Juniper, we're a networking company. That's good because it just justifies this acquisition we made of about a year ago in Mykonos, which is now Juniper Web App Secure. And we say, so great, have you deployed a web app firewall? People are saying WAFs are the way to control security at the web layer. And they say, yeah, we are, but the problem is that it's usually deployed in just sort of a monitor mode, if you will, so they're not blocking with the WAF. When we say, well, why? And the issue is that they're throwing too many false positives. Just too much inaccurate classification of what's risky and what's not. And so they say, well, we can't let good people get stopped from accessing resources, and so they go with the monitor mode. And we say, well, that doesn't make a ton of sense. And so what we've started to do is drive out this notion of deception as an opportunity for us to differentiate in the marketplace. And so instead of this high false positive rates, what we wanted to focus on was some technology that's actually been around for quite some time. But it's this notion of injecting fake code inside a web app. And so we put fake snippets of code through Web App Secure inside web applications, and we wait for bad actors to start tripping them. And so if they trip these bad snippets of these fake pieces of code, we know that they're malicious. We know that they're up to no good. They don't know sometimes that they're tripping false code, but we certainly do, and we certainly help our customers understand what's happening out there in their infrastructure. And so, of course, this is it's code that good users never see, right? So there's no impact to the application itself. It's only out there to find bad actors looking at your web tier. And so we say, you've been deceived, Mr. Bad Actor. You've tripped something that, again, you didn't know was out there, but we now know that you're out sniffing around, and it could be a human hacker, but it also could be an automated hacking tool. So both mechanisms would potentially trip what we push out into these applications. And then we start to, well, frankly, we start to mess with that hacker. And this is where the economics of hacking and making it more difficult for bad actors to find your applications comes into play. Because instead of, we can simply warn an attacker. If it's a human, we can block an attacker. But then we also have different and pretty interesting mechanisms to start pushing activities back to that hacker to see what they do with them. And so the intent here isn't necessarily to drop someone right away, to block them altogether. Maybe it was a drive-by. Maybe there really wasn't a ton of malintent. But we're going to figure that out, because we're going to start pushing out things like CAPTCHAs. If it's a bot coming in, we're going to push out CAPTCHAs to see if that slows the attack. But we're also going to start to slow the connection. So if it is a legitimate hacker, what may have taken minutes to do in terms of attacking a site, now will start taking hours. And all of a sudden, we make it really difficult for that bad actor to start or to continue to attack our application, or your application as it may be. And so the intent is they'll move on. Hacking's a business, right? I mean, there are nation states that are out there doing it. There are sophisticated sets of people around the globe setting up networks to attack and take IP as it is, money as it may be, from data centers around the world. And so our theory is if we actually make it more difficult for the hacker to do their work, that they'll move on to some other resource or some other mechanism to try to infiltrate. So if you're a user of our technology, you could say to your CEO, look, for years we've been building walls, right? We've been building walls around our network, around our infrastructure to stop bad people from coming in. But the reality is that this is a mechanism to get to the point where you, with almost zero false positives, know that people are sniffing around, that they've actually penetrated that wall, and that it's a second and third layer of protection against bad actors attacking resources in your infrastructure. So we've made it really hard for them to do their job. That's an important point. The hackers have either moved on or they're thinking about moving on, but at a minimum, they're pretty damn frustrated with their attempts to access your applications. And so you say to me, or I would say to us, to anyone, that's interesting, but how does that necessarily make the web a safer place? And that is our broader intent, is not just to stop bad actors attacking individual applications, is actually to share the data that we're collecting, and we'll do that, and Greg talked about this, but through fingerprinting. So the fingerprinting is a really interesting point. This is brand new for Juniper. It's not necessarily new to the marketplace. Certainly our government agencies have been using fingerprinting to identify with high certainty bad people around the world, but no one's really applied it to technology. And so we acquired Mykonos with some interesting patented ideas about how to apply this technology, and we've really driven it home over the last 12 months with some internal development. And so again, hundreds of touch points as we inject this super cookie out into the application after they've triggered this fake piece of code. And so we've profiled this device. We're doing it in real time with 99% certainty in terms of the profile that we've developed of that bad actor coming in. And that actor, in this case, is a device. It's not a human. Because you can say, well, they could pop IPs, they could go to another device. Sure, they could do all that stuff. But once we've captured the device, and we can have our technologists get into all the nitty-gritties of how that actually happens. And of course, again, at RSA 2013 in Singapore, just a few weeks from now, we're going to get detailed demos, and you can get into as much of the technology as you like, because it is pretty interesting. We're going to say to our customers, it's an identification well beyond IP. And IP has been the general sort of fallback mechanism in our industry for a long, long time, that will block the IP. But the problem with blocking IPs is that many customers or even countries deploy or have used proxy servers. And so it's not okay just to block an IP, because by blocking IPs, you may actually be blocking a whole set of people that perhaps could be perfectly legitimate, that you'd want to have access to the applications. And so the analogy is it's like taking an apartment building full of folks and blocking an IP, but the threat is that you block the whole apartment building when you're really just after one person. So we just don't think that's an effective way to do things, which is where the fingerprinting comes in. So that's the big difference. And then once we take that fingerprint, we know who the bad actor is, we've identified that device that they're coming in on, we take a look at bringing it back to the database, which is threaded. So I thought I'd walk through a scenario of actually how that actually happens. And in this scenario, a user comes to a secured web application. They've triggered the false code that we've already put in their apps themselves, and we've delivered a super cookie down to the device itself. And the super cookie cannot be deleted, it can't be scrubbed, they can't flush the cache, they can't get rid of this, despite how hard they may try. Now, they may think they did, but they don't, and we can talk about some of the technology offhand. And so once the super cookie's been deployed, it goes back to the protected site that's sitting behind the web app secure technology. We've taken the fingerprint, we've pushed that to the cloud, and in the cloud, we've started to do the profiling, as Greg mentioned. So now we've captured that device. And so what happens next is that the users of Web App Secure and then the Spotlight service will get that protection globally. So we'll push that fingerprint to all the protected resources that you may have. And then we'll have, obviously, the ability to share all of that across multiple customers coming in, as you might expect, with a global footprint. So that the bad actors that you may pick up, send to the database, can be shared globally with other customers of the Web App Secure and Spotlight. And so we're really excited about this potential technology, not only for this marketplace, but others. And we think that it's going to be the driving force ultimately to differentiate us for many, many years if we get it right. Now, all of this is shipping technology today. Our partners can demo it. And if you want to see this in action, it's a very compelling demo that I'd encourage you to check out. So that's my story on Spotlight. I'd like to end the presentation with a few questions. Does anybody have some questions on this content that I can answer today? No questions? Okay, well, I'll be around. And of course, we'll do the drinks after, and we look forward to doing some Q&A with you so that we can talk a little bit more about this. But at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the next speaker, and I thank you for your time and attention.